Galen, duck!
On this episode of Old Joe's Reminiscence, when a man and an ape are trapped in an ancient underground transit station, the two species must work together to rescue them. This third episode of the 1974 Planet of the Apes series to air was the fifth in production order. Added to the series opener, this episode would become the second half of the 1980 television film Back to the Planet of the Apes. Based on the short episode description that I had read and the mention of San Francisco in a previous episode, I'm looking forward to reviewing this one that I seem to remember watching 50 years ago. The Trap first aired on Friday, September 27, 1974, when I was just 15 years old. One online reviewer post on IMDb called The Trap, quote, "the best episode of a mostly poor series," unquote. Maybe that's why it stuck in my memory. But then again, I think I know the real reason it stayed with me. I just want to watch it again to make sure. I'll follow up at the end of the video if I'm right. So, did you see it in 1974? As a movie in 1980? I might actually have caught the rerun if the movie was still playing on TV in the mid-80s after I had left Dad's acreage in the middle of nowhere, got married, and moved to a place in town where there was cable television. Think you might want to watch this episode? If so, you'd better do it now before my review spoils it for you. Otherwise, let's drop right into the third episode of the 1974 CBS television series, Planet of the Apes. The Trap opens with a post-apocalyptic scene of a large metropolitan city, I'm guessing somewhere near San Francisco. A gorilla armed with a rifle is riding on horseback through the abandoned, rubble-strewn streets. The ape is Meemaw, played by Ron Stein, in the third of his many roles in the Planet of the Apes series. The gorilla appears to be searching for something, or maybe someone. Mark Leonard as Urko and two other gorillas are waiting impatiently, I might add, for Meemaw's return. Zako, the one who answers to Urko, is played by Norm Alden. He had played numerous roles, mostly bit parts, throughout his lengthy acting career. He'd portrayed real-life Major Truman Landon in the 1970 film Tora, Tora, Tora. Major Landon was the U.S. Army Air Force's squadron leader whose unarmed bombers had arrived during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. But Norm was more often recognized as Lou the Mechanic from the series of television commercials he did for AC Delco. Moving on, the astronauts and Galen see an ape flashing coded signals. I'm wondering where they got the aluminum foil to line that reflector. At first, Galen isn't sure he can decipher the signal. The script mentions the code being sent too fast, but that line was cut out. After a moment, Galen says they've been spotted. No hurry. It'll take Urko an hour or so to get there.
Unless he makes a mistake and takes the wrong road.
Why don't we suggest it to him?
Together, they distract and overpower the guard, and then Galen sends a signal to divert the pursuers. I couldn't help wondering how far they might have gotten in the time it took them to climb that hill. Meanwhile, Urko and his two gorilla companions are boiling corn in a pot hung above a campfire. There's an earthquake. One frightened gorilla tries to run. I think he's Olam, played by Eldon Burke in one of several uncredited roles he would play in the series. He played in the Planet of the Apes film in 1968. He would continue doing stunt work and acting for a few more years before concentrating on an assistant directing career. I've previously discussed Burke's theory of the three being near San Francisco, yet Urko's wall map resembles the Los Angeles metro area. It would take a lot of land shifting to cause that. I don't pretend to be an expert, but all attempts I've made to explain away the inconsistencies cannot account for those islands. After the quake subsides, Mima rides up and informs Urko that the fugitives have been spotted. They all mount up for the pursuit. Meanwhile, Galen suggests that they visit a nearby village where the humans can be trusted. Now, Urko and his troops notice that the signal operator isn't at his post. Oops. Their fake diversion didn't provide as much of a lead as they had hoped. As the fugitives enter the village, they attract a lot of attention, and they're approached by a human. The man who introduces himself as Miller is played by John Milford.
John Milford was born in Johnstown, New York on September 7 in 1927. He studied civil engineering at Union College. He spent some time at the Department of Public Works at Los Angeles Bureau of Engineering. He was involved in the design of the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He founded Chamber Theater and launched the careers of many actors. John became a favorite choice to play the bad guy in westerns. He was a semi-regular on Gene Roddenberry's The Lieutenant. Milford was a member of Carson's Players on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He played Captain Dempsey on the Dukes of Hazzard spin-off series Enos. John Milford was active on screen and stage until his death on August 14 in the year 2000.
If you ask me, Mr. Miller smiles too much. For reasons I won't delve into here, I'm always wary of someone who smiles constantly.
We are.
Miller introduces
I'm Miller.
his wife, Mary.
This is my wife, Mary.
And his son,
my son, Jake.
Mary Miller is played by actress Wallace Earl.
Born in Miami on June 27, 1926, Wallace Earl Sparks was named after an aunt on her father's side. She began appearing on screen as early as 1945 as an uncredited chorus girl in The Affairs of Susan. She made an appearance in a short film using the shortened name Wallace Earl in 1946. She was married to Arnold Lavin in 1951 and she is listed on IMDb as Wallace Earl Lavin. She did a few more uncredited film appearances before choosing the stage name Eileen Harley in 1956. Harley was a family name on her mother's side. Around 1960 she changed her stage name to Amanda Ames, a name that she used until 1970. She returned to Wallace Earl throughout the 1970s, except for one film performance as Phyllis Benson. She chose the name Amanda Harley on 4 final television appearances before retiring in 1984. Wallace Earl Lavin died on February 27, 2012 at the age of 85.
So, they're finally introducing a female character. Other than an occasional background extra here and there, I can't remember any others. Their son, Jick Miller, is played by Mickey LeClaire in his only screen role. They go inside, and Miller gets right to the point. He says he knows they're running from Urko, but he promises to deny seeing the fugitives if he's asked. That sounds reassuring. Meanwhile, Urko gets word that the signaler had been beaten and tied up. They split up the search in groups of 2. An overabundance of camera shaking indicates another earthquake as the 3 fugitives are dining at the Miller hut. For some reason, Mr. Miller seems unconcerned about these aftershocks. I guess he's used to them living in that area. Back at the crossroads, the apes meet up once again. There's no sign of their quarry. Orko mentions the village.
Numa has a reputation for harboring fugitives. Galen would know that.
How would Galen have gotten word that this village was known for harboring fugitives? A teenage girl returns from a trip to the city. She is Lisa Miller, played by Cindy Albacher.
The daughter of an oil company executive, Cindy Albacher was born on July 7, 1958 in Saudi Arabia. She and her older sister Lisa were raised in France before embarking on Hollywood acting careers, followed by their brother Bobby. Cindy made her television debut at the age of 6, and she was a popular child character actress through the 1960s. The young girl played Cindy Crabtree on 24 episodes of My Mother the Car. As a teen she played Martha Rose on 10 episodes of The Waltons. As an adult Cindy portrayed April Lynch Stevens on the popular soap opera The Young and the Restless. Cindy Albacher retired from acting in 1996 and she's now 66 years old.
Lisa is carrying some old computer relics, even by today's standards. She's wearing a necklace that she'd woven from some twisted pair wires similar to those used in 1970s multi-line telephones. Verdon wants to see where she'd found the computer items, and he estimates that they could reach the city before dark. Burke is against that. He wants to head for the hills before Orko finds them. At an impasse, the men leave the decision up to Galen, who says that if they don't go, there will always be uncertainty. So, they're going. Next, we see Orko and his group of guerrilla goons come riding into the village.
Look over there.
A few scenes were cut from the final script, dated July 31st, 1974, possibly because they may have been deemed a little too violent as originally written. Orko questions a woman. The only cast member that I haven't mentioned so far is an unnamed old woman played by Gail Bonney.
Goldie Bonowitz and her twin sister were born in Columbus, Ohio on December 15, 1901. Her early life is a mystery, but at the age of 46 she made her uncredited film debut in Slippy McGee. Most of her many roles were uncredited bit parts such as woman, nurse, or babysitter. She played an uncredited audience member in the 1952 Gene Kelly classic Singin' in the Rain. She was uncredited as Merle's maid in the 1958 Jimmy Stewart-Kim Novak romance Bell Book and Kendall. When credited, she used the moniker Gail Bonney, like when she appeared as the second witch on the Star Trek episode Cat Spa. She performed hundreds of roles in her 3 decades of bit part acting, and she retired at the age of 78. Gail Bonney died on December 7, 1984 at the age of 82.
Funny, I just watched Bell, Book, and Candle, and I never made that Star Trek connection. Orko threatens to shoot the woman if she doesn't snitch. She glances over at Miller. Uh-oh. Orko enters the Miller hut, where he finds that sack of artifacts that Lisa had found on her adventure. He discerns that Verdon would want to go there. The Miller family tries to convince Orko that the astronauts went south, but he knows they're lying.
I always assume a human is lying. Makes things easier.
I'll remember that.
In the city, there's debris strewn everywhere. Our lead characters are walking down the street, and the guerrillas on horseback aren't very far behind them. In another change from the original script, Galen isn't carrying a rifle. They were to have taken that from the signal sentry earlier. There's another aftershock. The 3 decide to split up, while Orko makes plans to surround them. Continuing where we left off at the end of Act 1, Burke and Verdon are beginning to regret their diversion into the city. They doubt that they'll find anything useful amongst all that rubble. Galen hisses, then the 3 split up as the gorillas ride toward them from different directions. Galen and Verdon both duck into buildings, but Burke gets caught out in the open, where Orko expertly lassos him. They're struggling against each other for control of that lasso when another aftershock hits. The street opens up and the two fall into a deep underground chamber. Galen watches in horror as a large concrete wall falls onto the opening, covering it and essentially burying Urko and Burke. Elsewhere, Verdon climbs a stairway to higher ground so that he can drop onto a pursuing gorilla. That gorilla is Zako, and he's knocked out. Verdon reaches for Zako's rifle, but Olam fires at him. There's supposed to be more shooting here, according to the script. Underground, Burke is regaining consciousness. He quickly checks on Urko before assessing his surroundings. As he's looking around, Urko comes to, and the two mortal enemies come to blows. Urko is about to choke Burke out when the human informs the ape that if Urko kills him, he'll be trapped in the subway.
You kill me and you kill yourself!
They're in a Bay Area rapid transit terminal. The BART subway car looks authentic, and it appears they got permission to use the actual BA logo, too. In the desolate streets up above them, the Apes and Verdon are still playing cat and mouse. Galen informs Verdon that Burke may be dead.
Oh, God.
After further explanation of what Galen saw happen, Verdon isn't too convinced.
Then you're not sure he's dead? Show me where.
They go to the place where Burke and Urko fell in. They'll need some help lifting all that debris. In the subway station, Burke is explaining the depictions of items on some wall posters. He avoids the last one that depicts a caged gorilla at the San Francisco Zoo. Either way, Urko begins to go berserk. He starts throwing Burke around until the human lies, telling Urko that everything had belonged to the apes and the humans were just pets. Then Urko agrees to work together. As we open Act 3, the gorillas in the street above the subway are conferring about Urko's disappearance when Verdon's voice booms out saying, Urko may die.
Urko may die. I repeat, Urko may die.
Galen's voice reiterates, Urko will die.
Urko will die unless he has help.
They all call a truce to discuss working together to save Urko and Burke. Olam breaks that truce by firing at Galen, but he's redressed by Zako. The gorillas eventually lay down their arms. Verdon tries tapping out a Morse code signal through a metal girder that's sticking out of the ground. In the subway below, Burke hears that tapping. He explains to Urko that the tapping is similar to the ape's light signals.
Sound signals, like your light signals.
There was a bit in the script about Burke having to stand on Urko's shoulders to reach the girder and send a response. That part was omitted. The gorillas don't believe that Urko is alive until Verdon asks for the name of Urko's wife. The signal comes back. Her name is Elta. Only then are they convinced.
Elta.
Burke then sends word that the air is getting bad down there.
The air down there's going. We gotta move fast.
Burke devises a plan to construct a ladder. He asks Urko to help, but Urko claims that he isn't one to do human labor. Burke asks if he's someone who enjoys suffocating.
I'll make an exception in this case.
In the streets above them, the apes are facing a bit of resistance from Verdon. He says that he won't help to save Urko unless Zako gives his word to let them go after the rescue. Now, after a bit of back and forth, Zako agrees, but I get the feeling that Urko will break that promise later. Back in the transit station, Urko is gathering the last beam they need for the ladder when he spies that zoo poster. Oops! He finds a piece of sharp metal that resembles a dagger. He uses it to pry the poster from the wall, and then he somehow manages to fold the poster small enough to hide it in his gauntlet. And that piece of metal resembling the dagger, it gets hidden in the other gauntlet. I guess we don't have to wonder what Urko's got up his sleeve now, do we? Our final act opens with Urko and Burke moving their improvised ladder closer to the hole. They are both feeling a bit weak because of their inadequate oxygen supply. The earth trembles again from another aftershock. A bit of debris falls from the ceiling, knocking them both down. Up at street level, the horses are now hitched to ropes, ready to pull the heavy wall away from the opening. Urko and Burke can hear the shouting from above as the piece of concrete is lifted. Verdon drops a rope, so they're no longer going to require that ersatz ladder. Burke graciously suggests that Urko go up first. Urko says that Burke isn't leaving. He mentions the poster, and he begins to pull it from his gauntlet. Burke freely admits that he's already seen it. Urko puts it back and pulls out that piece of metal, holding it out as one might wield a dagger. The human grabs a solar light to use as a shield to protect himself as the angry gorilla lunges forward. Urko is very nearly electrocuted when his weapon shorts out that electric light. Burke makes a loop in the rope for his friend to lift the unconscious gorilla out first. Then it's Burke's turn to be pulled out. This whole act plays out quite a bit differently than the way it was scripted, but on one thing they both agree.
Kill them! Get your rifles and shoot them!
Zako tells Urko that he can't kill them because he gave his word. Urko insists that he has his reasons for wanting them dead just before he finally collapses. Zako tells the other two to put Urko on a horse and to get him to a doctor. He explains to them that he will execute the three prisoners. Once the other apes are out of sight with their injured commander, Zako tells Verdon, Burke, and Galen to get lost.
Go!
Because he did give his word, and he's keeping it. As they're leaving, Zako fires 3 shots into the air to convince those other apes that he had executed the 3 as ordered. I'd hate to be in his shoes when Urko finds that out. Zako looks down and spies the folded poster on the ground. He picks it up and he examines it. He's shocked by what he sees. He angrily rips the paper to shreds with a feeling of utter disgust. And the fugitives live to continue their journey together as they explore the planet of the apes.
Once again, total nonsense. At one point, those humans resort to the oldest trick in the book, trying to lure a guard away from his post while on duty. Never going to happen. The chimpanzee Galen attempts the luring while those humans, Verdon and Burke, sneak up behind the guard. Pure fantasy. At least he doesn't go down without a proper fight. Later, when Urko and his troops arrive at the village, those humans try to trick him, but he's too smart for them. His superior ape intelligence proved too much for the humans. He knows that they're lying because humans always lie. Once they were in the city, the story goes crazy. The number of ape rifle shots that miss their targets is simply ludicrous. Who writes this garbage? And Galen, once again, is able to lure a guard away from his post, as if. When will the trope stop? As unlikely as it would be, the humans and gorillas worked together to save Urko. That was commendable, but the gorilla Zako must be held accountable for letting those fugitives go in the end. His punishment must be swift and severe.
My alter ego acts tough, but you should have seen him passing out candy on Halloween. Well, I must say that I most definitely remember watching this episode back in 1974. In fact, I have a very distinct memory of them being confined in the subway together. Their entrapment in the Bay Area Rapid Transit Station was particularly memorable to me for one very distinct reason. When this episode aired, my half-sister was living in San Bruno, California. She had been back here visiting in southwestern Pennsylvania, and I had heard her talking about taking Bart to work. It made me wonder, who is this Bart fellow? Well, I saw this episode on TV, and Bart, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, and suddenly it all made sense. She took Bart to work. Her old address was 2 blocks from the nearest subway station. I was also patiently awaiting the zoo poster that I'd remembered from viewing this episode. Those were my 2 main motivations for reviewing this Planet of the Apes television series in the first place. I have no lasting memories of the other episodes, and I've read that they go downhill as the series progresses. I guess I'll have to push through them and see. Do you remember viewing this episode? If so, what did you think then? How about now? Let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell so you know when my next review posts. And until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Old Joe's Reminiscence.